Like the lead up to the Kansas State game, well, I find this Missouri-LSU line to be a little bit curious. So let's talk about why. Plus, Trent Burns, a really interesting addition for Dennis Gates and company. So let's talk about, again, what's winding up to be a great recruiting class right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And you know what? I want to start this program actually by talking a little bit more about FanDuel Sportsbook, by the way, the official sportsbook of Locked On, he said for a second time. But seriously, a 6.5-point underdog is Missouri right now at home against LSU. And I got to say, that is a suspiciously high line. I don't really know what LSU has done so far through 5 weeks of the season to be favored by that much. I just frankly don't think this particular LSU team deserves that much respect. Now, don't get me wrong. To me, this game is a toss-up. You give me 50-50, flip a coin, I would agree with you there. Put the LSU on one side, put the Missouri Power Cat on the other, and just flip it, and we'll see what happens. I can see that argument for sure, but for LSU to be nearly a full touchdown and an extra point favorite, that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And unlike the Kansas State game a few weeks ago, where I thought that line was suspiciously low, and it was actually FanDuel Sportsbook kind of begging you to take Kansas State, well, it's sort of the opposite in this particular case. It seems like my friends over at FanDuel are begging you to take Missouri this week. They're hoping, hey, recency bias will factor in here. Missouri undefeated, ranked slightly higher than LSU, 21 versus 23. So you might be just thinking on paper, well, I got to take the 6.5-point underdogs at home, right? The team that's playing excellent football right now. So that is suspicious and actually makes me somewhat worried about Missouri's chances this week. But I will say this, I just wonder if maybe this is simply the odds makers saying, you know what, we've got the public team here, LSU, a team that has won multiple national championships here in this millennium, in this century. In fact, just 2019 wasn't too long ago, in January of 2020, where LSU most recently won a national title. Of course, as Missouri fans knew, well, LSU didn't quite follow up on it quite as well in that 2020 season. But to me, you even look at the advanced statistics so far in this season, which not only take into account the S&P Plus stats over at ESPN.com, written and compiled by our own Bill Conley, former Missouri guy. Well, his stats have Missouri so far. Again, this factors in not only this season, but past seasons' data as well, which we can argue about it all day. That stuff does tend to be predictive, which my point is that would favor LSU, right? They're the team that has the higher-ranked recruits every season. They've had more success, obviously, than Missouri in recent history. So what I'm saying is those numbers have Missouri 27th and LSU 24th. That's not much of a difference there, especially not a 6.5-point difference when indeed Missouri is the home team. LSU coming off its second loss already. I sort of maintain that, if anything, LSU might be a little bit discombobulated, a little bit demoralized coming off that huge loss than they are, say, angry and ready to prove themselves. Because, you know, LSU players, they come to that campus to compete for a national title, to compete for the college football playoff. And, well, seeing the over-under total, by the way, over at FanDuel Sportsbook, 63.5 points. This is looking like it's probably going to be a shootout. I just don't know how you can honestly say that LSU should be favored by nearly a touchdown. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. At the same time, I'm not really sure what it means yet either. I need to take a deeper dive into this matchup this coming week. So if you're absolutely going to bet on Missouri this week, I would say do it right now. I'm not saying you should do it. I'm saying if you're going to, probably bet on it right now. And by the way, the money line plus 215, that means you're getting more than twice your money if Missouri wins this ball game. If this is really a toss-up game, like I suspect it is, that's about as good a value as you're going to find online. So I can't argue with anybody who wants to hop on it right now. I don't think you're going to get a better number than this. That's for sure. At the same time, I just personally want to do a little bit more homework. And speaking of doing my homework, well, doing my homework these last few weeks led me to figure out that Theo Weiss is performing even better than his stats had shown the first few weeks. Obviously, Weiss had a big-time breakout game this Saturday in Nashville against Vanderbilt. Well, it also leads you to believe that Luther Burden III, it's not just that he's overwhelming with athletic ability right now. Although he certainly is doing that, he's also running great routes too. You can just see this over and over again. He looks like a so much more mature player, a veteran player who just looks like he's been in this system and this Missouri offense for 4 years now and not just about a year and a third here as we get through the season. So just an unbelievably, if I was saying in the previous episode that I couldn't really think of anything else to say about Luther Burden III, well, I'm just going to point out that he's doing the little things in terms of route running and all that stuff as well. And by the way, remember when drops seemed to be a bit of an issue for Luther last season? That has definitely not popped up yet this season. Also, Marquise Speedy Johnson. Yes, not only is he speedy, but when you watch him, you go back and watch those perfect balls that Brady Cook has put on him for touchdowns here. He's tracking the ball just really effortlessly in the air is one thing I noticed. Just you notice how calm his body and head are as he's just tracking this long ball right into his hands. I don't know, there's just something there. He's not just a track star. There's no doubt about that. And I thought it was another good sign that although this ended up being a penalty on Johnson for illegal motion, timing was a little off on the play. If you remember the Super Bowl from this past season, the Chiefs a couple times ran a play where Kadarius Toney came in motion toward the football as if he were the jet sweep guy. Well, as soon as the ball was snapped, he started going in the other direction, and he was wide open because as we've seen the Missouri defense, among many others, do time and time again, you put that jet guy in motion, a lot of times there's essentially a basketball switch. The secondary starts communicating and say, okay, you take the jet guy, I'm going to stay over here. But if you snap the ball right at that moment, well, you're gonna fool the switch, essentially, and that's what the Kansas City Chiefs did. Again, I just thought, I said all offseason I wanted to see Eli Drinkwitz and any team I would root for, frankly, but I'm a Missouri fan, so I wanted to see Eli Drinkwitz put that play into the playbook. So I love that Missouri has stolen that playbook from Andy Reid and company. Again, I also think it's just a good sign that we're not just using Speedy Johnson as a guy to run 9 routes or run a deep post or something like that and hit the deep balls. Apparently they're trusting him enough and want to use him enough around the line of scrimmage in the red zone situations too. Now, Johnson right now is not even playing very many snaps. So just imagine how good he's going to be when he starts to figure it out, because he's been incredibly impactful so far when he's out there for the Tigers. And because defenses, for obvious reasons, are focusing on Luther Burden so much, I'm telling you right now, you better pay attention when Speedy is in the game, because even though, again, limited snaps, if there is no safety help over the top for him, I mean, you're done basically, especially the way Brady Cook is throwing the ball, and especially the way the offensive line is giving him a pretty clean pocket for the most part. So again, Marquise Johnson going to keep learning as the season goes on, and I think next year, boy, he should really take off without a doubt. And coming up, another very large addition to the 2024 basketball recruiting class, and I mean that figuratively and literally in terms of being large. So let's talk about the 7'3" center for the 2024 class, Trent Burns, coming up here in just a little bit. But first, I want to tell you about the game changer of the week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. And much like Josh Landry, Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. And you know what? Josh Landry really changed the Vanderbilt approach last week by just blowing up their backfield on multiple occasions. And really, I could have picked a few other guys on the interior. I thought Realist George, Jaden Jernigan in particular, Christian Williams made some impactful plays as well, but I'm going to give it to Josh Landry this week. And you know what? Again, Athletic Brewing, their brews are great tasting, award-winning, and they beat out full-strength beers in global competitions with all types of beer, including IPAs, Goldens, sours, and more. And you know what? Socially, they are fit for any occasion, so how can you beat that? So you know what? Find Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic brews at a store near you or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. Thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. And for your second listen on Friday, definitely check out Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. It will be live from 10 a.m. to noon every Friday, but you can also check it out on demand anywhere on the Locked On College YouTube network and, of course, on my channel as well. But you know what? Let's talk some basketball here really quickly, because Trent Burns, another four-star player, commits to Dennis Gates and Missouri for the 2024 class, ranked 75th in the country over at Rivals.com. And over at Rivals, well, they have the number 2 class. Burns edition makes them currently the number 1 class nationally in the country, whereas 24/7 Sports already had Missouri as the number 1 national class out there. And, well, I guess if you want to go with this, the floor, I guess I've just given you the ceiling. Well, the floor over at On3.com, they have Missouri as only the 7th best class in the country. You know what? I would take the 7th best class in the country. I would say Dennis Gates, basically his 3rd recruiting cycle, maybe his 2nd full recruiting cycle, you could say, having a true full season to recruit guys for the Tigers. Obviously, that first class, hey, we're always going to love Demoy Hodge and DeAndre Golston and all the guys who made that 23 team so special for sure. But I just think, obviously, you're seeing Dennis Gates with more time, with already a season established and a really good season at that for Missouri. Well, it's leveling up the recruiting, to say the least. And Trent Burns is a really, really interesting prospect at 7'3", just a little over 210 pounds, something like that. You know, hey, guess what? This has become my pet peeve, right? Anytime there's a tall, skinny guy, somebody's going to rush to their keyboard and say, boy, he's really got to hit the weight room. No kidding. We got it. We can pass with that observation. Name me a player who isn't going to hit the weight room coming out of college, and then maybe go with that comment instead. But anyway, that's just my personal pet peeve. But what Burns is, a guy who seems to just now be starting to tap into what he's going to be, in my opinion. I really wouldn't expect much out of him his freshman season. Of course, that won't be this coming season. That'll be the following season in 24-25. God, it's insane to sound that we're really saying 24, 25. That actually kind of blows my mind a little bit. But regardless, as a 7'3" kid here, you know what? He shows some post moves in his EYBL highlights, but I think maybe the biggest reason beyond just his obvious length. Excuse me here for a second, folks. Sorry about that. Didn't want to cough into the microphone. But anyway, Trent Burns, a guy who has shown the ability to get on the block and put the ball up with a jump hook. But I think the reason Dennis Gates is clearly the most intrigued with him beyond his 7'3" frame and his length defensively is that he's willing to step out and knock down three-pointers. Yes, it's 7'3", folks. Connor Vanover apparently similar as well, but over a few game stretch here, Burns knocked down about 35% of his three-pointers, though that's a pretty small sample size, and there have been other sample sizes where Burns' three-point shooting hasn't been all that impressive. What I'm assuming is that a year with this young man under Dennis Gates, his staff, his tutelage, I just think that could really, really pay off in the long run. This is the type of player who has enormous upside, I would say, the type of body that, yes, he's going to need to hit the weight room. He's going to need to fill out, and frankly, he just needs time to grow into his 7'3" frame. It's not as though he's been 7'3" his entire life. It's going to take him some time to actually adjust to that frame of his. Big guys in general take a little bit longer to develop typically. Well, I think that's even more true the taller that you get. So a little bit of patience will be in order here for Trent Burns, but even just without any analysis whatsoever, the fact that the 75th player in the entire country is sort of almost getting toward the floor of this class, much less the ceiling. Well, that's just incredibly encouraging, obviously. And if Jaden Quaintance, who is a top 15 type caliber player, another big guy, 6'9", 6'10" in that range, I mean, my goodness, if Missouri gets him, now you're talking about a class that's going to be absolutely top 5 at the end of this whole cycle. Now, one thing to note about this 2024 class is it's turning out to be rather long, just in terms of height, arm length, all that stuff. It's just somewhat big heavy, I guess you can say, and notably without a true point guard in the lot. Certainly not really any ball handlers either. Not a, Marcus Allen, for instance. I'm really high on his upside, but I wouldn't say he's a guy who's going to be a lead type ball handler, somebody who's attacking one-on-one at the end of the shot clock the minute he steps on campus. But back to the point guard idea, I've already noted that Dennis Gates may well just prefer, at least based on what he has available in this current class, he may prefer to take a veteran point guard from the transfer portal when Nick Honor and Sean East lose their eligibility. And I'd also note, so far at least, that we're really early, obviously, in the 2025 basketball cycle. But just in terms of offers, it doesn't seem like Missouri is throwing out nearly as many offers to big guys in that class. So with Peyton Marshall in the fold, with Jaden Quaintance potentially joining the fold, obviously with Trent Burns in the class as well, you've got a lot of size there and some diverse size as well. So I think Missouri can be a little bit more selective in 2025 when it comes to big guys, and you'll probably see that be a little bit more of a guard-heavy class if I had to guess. But, of course, even during the season, yes, Eli Drinkwitz and company, well, they got to keep recruiting as well, and they just received another commitment from an athlete, Austyn Dendy. Let's talk about Austyn coming up, and also, well, I think actually LSU, I think we can all agree that Georgia is the toughest game left on paper on Missouri's schedule, but actually I think LSU, it's not the second hardest. I actually think there's a game that's tougher on the remaining schedule for the Tigers. So let's talk about that, but first I want to tell you about a FanDuel, because you got to snap into action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Now, as I said on the top of the show, I think the 6.5-point line, at least at first glance, is a little bit high to me. I don't think it's absurd for LSU to be favored in this ball game, but to me, anything more than a field goal is just getting a little bit too out of it. However, I will say that, especially based on this start to the season, after an impressive victory at home over Florida, where Kentucky just completely dominated the Gators on the ground in particular. Well, if Kentucky in Lexington, if we looked at it right now and they were favored by 6.5 over Missouri, I'd say that's about right, because frankly, I think I'm more worried about the Kentucky game in Lexington than I am about LSU at home right now. Now, after Saturday, I could be eating those words for sure, but mostly, I just want to give credit to Kentucky here, a team that I think maybe sometimes we as Missouri fans think we're entitled to beat or something like that, but it certainly hasn't happened as much as we would like over the last few seasons. And once again, I think Kentucky, that defense is looking very legitimate, borderline elite, I would say so far. And secondly, after Liam Cohen, their offensive coordinator from 2021, well, he left last season to go to the NFL, join up with Sean McVay and the LA Rams. Well, it turns out he's maybe better suited for college because he's back at Kentucky once again, and I just think that makes a big difference for that Kentucky offense here in 2023. Of course, Will Levis off to the NFL. Devin Leary, now their quarterback, NC State transfer. I don't see a huge drop-off there, I got to be honest with you, despite Levis, again, being an NFL draft pick. I just don't think the difference there is maybe as much as you would think at first glance. So Kentucky, they're going to be a real challenge for Missouri, and considering Missouri has South Carolina, Florida, and Tennessee at home, other than Georgia, I think that Kentucky in Lexington, may be the toughest game left on the Tigers' schedule. And finally, let's close it out here. Let's talk about Austyn Dendy, an athlete from Pine Bluff who Eli Drinkwitz and company got a commitment from over this weekend. Again, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. What really stands out about this young man is his reported 4.4 speed. He definitely looks incredibly fast on film, especially for a kid who's relatively big at 6'1", 200 pounds. Perhaps he's a safety, perhaps he's a receiver. Unclear at this point, but a guy who chose the Tigers over Ole Miss, among other notable programs. So a really nice ad here by the Tigers, and it seems like in this class, they're maybe more willing than in the past to take athlete kids who maybe don't have a settled position yet, but they do have top-end athleticism. I actually like that as a strategy. It's actually a place where Gary Pinkel lived a lot in his days recruiting at Missouri, so maybe Missouri starting to get back to that just a tiny bit. But obviously, the more five-star guys like Williams-Winery you can get, even better. But I tell you what, thanks as always for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. And for you everydayers, I'll see you tomorrow on the program as always. And speaking of 5 stars, hey, hit me with a 5-star review over at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. Pretty sure that helps the old algorithm, right? It definitely can't hurt. So I appreciate you. As always, I'll see you all tomorrow right here on Locked On Mizzou.